Russia and Ukraine exchanged 150 prisoners of war in the latest agreement mediated by the United Arab Emirates. Poland is to raise its defense budget to a whopping 4.7% of GDP this year, says the country's president.
The death toll from a mass shooting at a school for adult education in Sweden rose to 11, with officials warning this number could still rise.
Angry metal workers from across Europe protest in Brussels, claiming green transition is causing job losses beyond anticipations, and the funds created for the transition are not enough.
Russia and Ukraine have exchanged 150 captured soldiers in the latest prisoner of war exchange between the two countries. The two sides regularly swap prisoners of war in one of the only forms of cooperation between Kiev and Moscow amid the now nearly 3-year war. Some of the soldiers have been in captivity for more than 2 years, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a post on social media. Russia's defense ministry said its troops were undergoing medical checks in allied Belarus before returning to Russia. Both sides said the deal was mediated by the United Arab Emirates, which has helped broker many such exchanges in the past.
For the first time since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukrainian President Zelensky has stated this Tuesday night that he's ready for direct talks with Russian President Putin if it's the only way to achieve peace. The Ukrainian president's statement comes amid mixed feelings in the country. The scale of losses caused by 3 years of a devastating war is wearing off on civilians, and according to opinion polls, more than half of Ukrainians are aspiring to a negotiated ceasefire. The military, for their part, are distrustful as to Russia's intentions if Moscow agrees to the talks. They say previous ceasefires agreed upon to contain Russia on the Eastern Front a decade ago were breached and urged for caution at the negotiation table. Many within the Ukrainian army fear that any new ceasefire agreement would only allow Russian troops to restore and attack again with renewed force. I'm Valerie Goria in eastern Ukraine for Euronews.
The Kremlin has successfully launched a rocket into space in the, quote, interest of national defense, said the Russian Defense Ministry on Wednesday. It released footage showing a Soyuz spacecraft blasting off from Russia's northern Cosmodrome in Plesetsk. According to the ministry, the Soyuz 2.1V carrier was carrying, quote, space devices. Russian media reported that military satellites were on board. The launch follows a similar mission in early December last year. Poland's defense spending will reach 4.7% of its GDP this year, the country's president announced on Wednesday. Andrzej Duda said the budget is expected to reach €30 billion, making it the largest defense budget among NATO countries. He also said that Poland will be strengthening its defense alliance with the United States.
Podkreśliłem także znaczenie współpracy sojuszniczej, zacieśniania relacji z naszym głównym sojusznikiem, ze Stanami Zjednoczonymi. Nie tak dawno otwarliśmy oficjalnie bazę w Redzikowie przeciwrakietową. To bardzo taka twarda amerykańska inwestycja w zakresie bezpieczeństwa na naszym terytorium. Cieszę się z tego ogromnie. Mam nadzieję, że tych amerykańskich inwestycji tutaj na wschodniej flance u nas będzie więcej.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has publicly agreed that spending needs to be increased across the alliance and has called for his fellow EU members to protect Europe's eastern flank against Russian aggression. During the election campaign, Donald Trump notoriously said he would encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want to allies who don't spend at least the required 2% of their GDP on defense.
The Polish government announced the election umbrella program to ensure national cybersecurity during election campaigns ahead of presidential elections in May. The program hopes to combat disinformation, model the processes of financing election campaigns, and train election committees. Speaking to Euronews, the Polish Minister for Digital Affairs said Poland is one of the countries most exposed to cybercrime. He reports that Polish services close over 200 internet domains with harmful content each day. Government information claims Poles are recruited online and offered between 3,000 and 4,000 euros to cooperate with Russian services ahead of the election.
To są lata więzienia, więc przestrzegam wszystkich, którzy chcieliby skorzystać z łatwych, szybkich pieniędzy po to, żeby połączyć się przy współpracy z rosyjskimi służbami, żeby wpływać na polskie wybory, bo to się skończy więzieniem.
The opposition Law and Justice Party considers the ruling coalition's program to be a pre-election attempt at internet censorship.
Coś takiego nie nazywa się parasolem wyborczym, tylko po prostu zamachem na demokrację w Polsce. Hasło znakomite, kierunek znakomity. Wszyscy troszczmy się o to, żeby wybory były wolne, uczciwe i niezakłócone przez nikogo, natomiast zróbmy to środkami, które są do tego adekwatne.
The Law and Justice Party will officially present its own proposal and digital platform next Thursday. The first round of presidential elections in Poland will take place on May the 18th.
The death toll from a mass shooting at a school for adult education in Sweden rose to 11 on Wednesday. Officials warned that this number could still rise. Citizens laid tributes to the victims at the site of the attack. Candles were lit and flowers laid as police helicopters circled above the heavily policed scene. A witness said he and his fellow students barricaded themselves in a classroom with tables and chairs before police came and knocked down the door.
And when they took us out from the classroom, when I passed the entrance to the school, I looked down and there was blood everywhere. And then I looked to the right, inside the school, it was blood everywhere on the floor. It was crazy. Crazy.
Authorities were working to identify the victims and said the suspected gunman was among the dead. There were no warnings beforehand, and police believe the perpetrator acted alone, but did not release a possible motive.
U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement that the U.S. could take over Gaza after its population were permanently displaced to other countries has been condemned across the Middle East and beyond. Meanwhile, the decision is celebrated by members of Israel's cabinet and received well by the Israeli public. Israel's war on Gaza, which lasted for 15 months, has devastated the region. Trump claimed Palestinians can't live there and that Gaza could be turned into the Riviera of the Middle East.
中方始终认为，8人制8是加沙战后治理的基本原则。我们反对针对加沙民众的强制迁移，希望有关各方以加沙停火和战后治理为契机，推动巴勒斯坦问题重回以两国方案为基础政治解决的正确轨道，实现中东的持久和平。
The Foreign Ministry of Saudi Arabia issued a statement saying it rejected any attempt to displace Palestinians from their homeland and that it would not establish ties with Israel without a Palestinian state. Also, France expressed their opposition to the forced displacement of the Palestinian population of Gaza and said it would be a serious violation of international law. And the Kremlin said they believe a Middle East settlement is only possible through a two-state solution. Also, the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said his government continues to support a two-state solution where both Israelis and Palestinians could live in peace and security.
Angry and discontent, metal workers from across Europe met in Brussels. They fear for their jobs and their livelihoods because of the European green transition. They are demanding that the bloc's new industrial policy includes more safeguards for workers and families in the sector. One of the workers' demands is for the EU to create more effective training and retraining of workers, even at the expense of working time.
We willen dat als werknemers de transitie maken naar een klimaatneutrale industrie, dat zij mee moeten opgeleid worden om die transitie te kunnen maken en dat wij als vakbonden betrokken worden in het overleg om die maakindustrie en die transitie te kunnen maken naar een klimaatneutrale maakindustrie.
Almost 1 million industrial jobs have been lost in the EU since 2019. According to the trade unions, employers are cosmeticizing the full extent of the crisis with short-term contracts and reduced working hours, which could mean up to 4.3 million job losses. Trade unions say more than 100,000 jobs have been put at risk in recent months. Large companies across Europe have announced factory closures and redundancies. Two German companies, ThyssenKrupp and Volkswagen, are on the top of that list. To help with the transition, the EU has set up the Just Transition Fund as part of the Green Deal with 17.5 billion euros. The amount seems big, but so is the task.
I think it's good that we have a Just Transition Fund, but I think right now it's not big enough and it can't be used for everything that it needs to be used. For my intents, we need to broaden the scope. We need to have enough resources, especially in those regions where the transition really hasn't taken place yet. So it's important to have a strong Just Transition Fund to support those sectors that need to transition and make sure that the workers get the benefit of it.
Trade union representatives also had talks with the European Commissioner for Industrial Strategy. They want the executive to draw up a directive on fair transitions, forcing companies to anticipate and manage change in full cooperation with trade unions.